Two.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Vigelli, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today is Dr. Keisha Davis, the county's health officer, as well as Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. Our guests this afternoon are Dr. Amina Johnson, LGBTQ plus liaison from the county's Office of Community Partnerships, as well as Monica Jeffries Has Angels, President and CEO of Strathmore. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Good afternoon, Mr. County Executive.
And good afternoon. Thanks for joining me. And I just want to start by saying, we're going to start by talking about Pride Month, and I'm going to make a few remarks before I turn it over to our guests today. I think we all know that this is a really difficult time for the LGBTQ community. The national temperature has made a lot of the work that's being done there much more difficult than it was just a few months ago. People who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, transgender, or intersex are our friends, our coworkers, and our neighbors. And they're part of our family. And we need to make sure we never lose sight of that, especially now when so many people are working to strip them of their rights and their humanity. When I was on the Tacoma Park City Council some years ago, we became one of the first municipalities in the country to require that our hospitals grant visitation rights the same way they would to spouses or family. We had an issue where gay partners were not able to visit their partner in the hospitals because a parent might say that person's partner was not a family member. And technically, because relationships weren't recognized, they weren't family members. And what the city did was create a domestic registry so you could register a relationship as a domestic relationship. This was in the days before we could do gay marriage, but it was our way of recognizing the relationships so that people could do just a basically decent thing, which is visit your loved one in the hospital. And it's kind of hard to believe that hospitals would have honored a parent's request not to let a partner visit the person who's sick, but that's the way it was back then. That may not seem so radical today, but at the same time, at that time anyway, it was. But it made a difference to people, and we should not pull back from that. Society's made a lot of progress in a short time. Shouldn't be any confusion about it, but we're definitely not going to go backwards, which seems to be what the Trump administration would like us to do. And I think that's what we see that is really troubling. Trump administration's attacking the LGBTQ plus communities through executive orders, state level bans on gender affirming care, and now through plans to defund specialized mental health services for LGBTQ youth, including eliminating the LGBTQ plus hotline from the national 988 crisis line. That hotline alone takes over 2,000 calls a day. These are policies that have life and death consequences. We all know that the LGBTQ plus community youth face higher risks of suicide. Cutting off support in the middle of a mental health crisis is cruel and it's dangerous. And that's why it's so important for allies to show up, especially those who aren't part of the LGBTQ, excuse me, who aren't part of the LGBTQ plus community. Much of the progress that we've seen over the past few decades has happened because more people, including straight people and even religious institutions that once rejected LGBTQ plus people, have all chosen tolerance, acceptance, and inclusion as the way we're going to live with each other. I've been proud to stand as an ally and be visible in our support, even when it was unpopular, even when it was illegal to be gay. I have never understood how some people are incapable of seeing them for human beings, that they have all the same hopes and dreams that we have, yet they face challenges in society over their identity that no one else has to face, all for something that is personal and has no impact on the rest of us. Whether you're standing in lines, studying in school, or working on your job, the identity of the person next to you, which affects you not one iota, should not be the defining factor by which you judge someone. It's not logical, it's irrational, and it's wrong. I'm proud that Montgomery County continues to stand up, not just with words, but with actions, Recently, we were able to move the MoCo Pride Center into office space in the Bethesda Chase Regional Services Center at a time when LGBTQ plus organizations around the country are losing federal support and struggling to stay afloat. This kind of local backing is critical. These organizations are lifelines to people, and we're going to keep doing everything we can do to support them. So today I'm grateful to be joined by two people who are doing the hard work of building connection in community. Dr. Amina Johnson, our county's LGBTQ plus community liaison, has been an incredible voice and leader for this work. And Monica Jeffries Azangeles, president and CEO of Strathmore, who recently stepped up to make sure that World Pride Festival concert featuring the International Pride Orchestra and the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. had a welcoming stage when they needed one. So I'm going to turn it over now to Amina and Monica. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. I'll start. Thank you so much, Mark, for acknowledging your support and the county's support for the LGBTQ plus community. It is greatly appreciated. I will just start by reiterating that we are in some really troubling times for lots of people, including LGBTQ plus people. But I'd also like to talk about the intersectionality of all of these issues. For example, LGBTQ plus people are immigrants, and lots of LGBTQ plus people are immigrants, and a lot of LGBTQ plus people who are immigrants are here because of their LGBTQ identity, because they face discriminations in their countries of origin, and and we know that immigrants are being targeted right now as well. And the taking away funding from the portion of the 988 hotline that speaks to LGBTQ folks is only going to make the issue worse because of everything going on. The other thing I'd like to bring up that's happening is that the criminalization of parents with transgender children. During April is Child Abuse Awareness Month, and the Trump administration described the sinister threat of gender ideology as one of the most prevalent forms of child abuse facing the country today. And so I think it's really important that as a county, we support our LGBTQ folks, in particular, our transgender youth and our transgender parents. I had a conversation with a parent on Sunday at the MCPS Pride Community Day that she was afraid for her child. She explained to her child, who was assigned male at birth, that sometimes he would have to be a boy in order to keep him safe. And so I just want to, talk about how serious it is, but also thank the county executive and the county for their support. And I also just want to talk a little bit about what's going on during Pride Month. Happy Pride, everybody. And we will prevail because Pride was a riot. It started as a riot. And so we will absolutely prevail. But there are a couple of things going on this month that I just want to bring your attention to. Live in Your Truth has drag duels. They just had one this Friday, and they have the semifinals on June 13th and the finals on June 29th at Pride in the Plaza. Poolsville Pride happens on June 14th. There were several Pride festivals this weekend at MCPS and Rockville and Tacoma Park. And Pride in the Plaza, which is the county's big Pride celebration, happens on June 29th from 12 to 8 at Veterans Plaza. And I also just want to talk about a couple of ongoing things that we have for the LGBTQ community, because Pride is 365 around here. There's a T for T Zoom support group that happens once a month, and it's put on by Trans Maryland, that actually happens tonight at 6:30. There's Drag Story Hour that happens on June 26th, and that's at the Silver Spring Library at 11 a.m. And there's an in-person Maryland Trans Unity support group meeting on July 6th. It's not in Pride Month, but we've passed the one for this month. And that's at 2. And every Thursday online, I host a hope and support circle for the LGBTQ community. And we mainly try to focus on joy and the wonderful things that are going on. Last week, we talked about food and our favorite recipes and the craziest things we've ever eaten. But we also talk about what's going on in the community. But we try to keep hope because, that is important. And as I said, we will prevail. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much. for inviting us, Mark. Happy to be here. Strathmore has been a participant regularly in the county's Pride activities. We participate in Pride in the Plaza and are excited about that event coming up. Strathmore, very simply, is a place for everyone. We are really thrilled that the International Pride Orchestra is coming to Strathmore. Nurturing artists and celebrating the full diversity of our community is right at the heart of what we do. And this concert will be a really joyful reflection of those values. I wanted to share a little bit about how the concert came to us. One of our colleagues and the president CEO of the National Philharmonic, who is a resident partner at the Music Center at Strathmore, Jim Kelly, connected us with the founding artistic director of the orchestra, Michael Roast. When it was announced that the Kennedy Center wouldn't be providing a contract to them for a performance. I believe that's how it came to them. So they reached out to us, we got connected, and we looked at our availability and tried to accommodate. And sure enough, we were able to find a date that worked for all parties. It amplifies our values having this wonderful group at Strathmore. We believe the arts are essential and everyone deserves access to them. We try as a presenter to be very diverse in our own programming. We engage with arts and community partners from around the county and around the country, obviously, who specialize in different genres. And we also rent the facility to a wide variety of outside partners. And so in that way, we ensure a really diverse menu of offerings for our patrons, for our neighbors and residents of the county, which is our primary goal. I want to make sure I cover some of the questions that were included ahead of time. I think I might have. The concert is happening tomorrow evening at 7:30 in the concert hall here at the Music Center. And I'm very happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you very much both for your opening remarks. And members of the media, we are going to open it up right now for questions for Dr. Johnson and for Ms. Jeffries Hayes Angels. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. I see you, Kevin Dupree, DC News Now. Good afternoon. How are you?
Yes, good afternoon. How are you doing? I
Great.
have a quick
Go ahead.
question for Dr. Amina Johnson. Being that we're in the first 6 months of the Trump presidency, we still have 3.5 years to go. As far from a LGBTQ community standpoint, how would you say that the outlook is from your vantage point? Are you optimistic about it? Are you a little concerned moving forward with some of the actions that he's already taken or plan to take? How would you kind of summarize that?
I'm very concerned. I'm particularly concerned for trans youth and their parents, because it is very clear in the wording that this administration is using that they are trying to criminalize trans parents that support their children, but also anyone who supports trans people and trans youth. Another executive order is trying to prevent people who have worked for organizations that have nonprofit organizations that support immigrants and that support trans people from receiving the public service loan forgiveness benefit. And they are specifically calling it illegal actions in any organization that participates in illegal actions. So I'm very concerned. Right now, they're laser focused on immigrants, but also that's what's getting the attention. But a lot of these things have been around, these executive orders have come out in April and even March. So I'm very concerned.
Thank you very much for that. If I could ask a follow-up question,
Yeah.
how do you think that the LGBT community as a whole comes together to push back against some of those policies and some of those actions taken by the administration?
I think in two ways. I think the first way is there are lots of LGBTQ organizations working on the front lines, um, going to meetings, working with state policy, working with local policies, um, and fighting back against government policy. So there are lots of LGBTQ organizations that are doing that. But the other way is just celebrating Pride Month and being proud and always being who we are in spite of it all, and practicing community care and taking care of one another. So I think those are the things that we're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Members of the media, any more questions for our two guests? No more questions? Well, thank you both for joining us this afternoon. You can remain on the call if you'd like to, but if you need to depart, please feel free to do so. Thank you. Mr. County Executive.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn attention now to something else we're celebrating this month. This is Immigrant Heritage Month. Montgomery County is one of the most ethnically and religiously diverse places in the country. In fact, we may be the most religiously diverse place in the country. That diversity didn't happen by accident. It's a result of centuries of people coming here from all over the world to build a life, raise a family in a country that offered the hope for a better life that existed in the countries they came from. So pretty much everybody has come here for the same reason. Of course, I have to point out that the notable exception to that were the human beings who came here from Africa, who were brought here unwillingly to be slaves. They didn't come looking for a better life. They didn't choose to come. They were brought. And the other group of people who have never been part of this equation are the people we tried to exterminate, which are the Native Americans who were here before us and who had their land stolen and most of their freedoms erased. So other than those two groups, everybody else who's gotten here has come here looking for a life that was better than where they were before. Today, more than a third of our residents are foreign-born. Over 162 languages are spoken in our schools. That includes immigrants from El Salvador, Ethiopia, India, China, Philippines, Cameroon, South Korea, Guatemala, Ukraine, Russia, pretty much all over the world. When I was a kid in the 60s, only 5% of the residents of this county were immigrants. It's a very different place now. It's almost total immigrant populations around 54% of the county. When we talk about immigrant heritage, we're not just talking about Latino, Asian, or African communities. Sometimes we forget that immigrant roots run deep across all backgrounds, including white residents whose families came here from Germany, Ireland, Italy, Poland, England, France, Russia, basically from all over Europe for the first almost 2 centuries of this country's existence. As late as 1960, 75% of all of America's foreign-born population came from Europe. So there's been a change in that since 1960. But for the first part of our history, the immigrants were largely from Europe. This country is always dependent on immigrants. Unless you're a person who's 100% Native American, then you're as much of an immigrant as anybody else is in this nation. Myself personally, I'm second generation American. My father and mother were the first generation born here in my family. That is a historical fact. And that's why it's so frustrating, frankly dishonest, that the Trump administration is framing and generalizing all immigrants as public safety threats and essentially criminalizing immigration. This is not necessarily new to American history. Even when the immigration was largely white, populations from different parts of Europe and with different religions than the predominantly Protestant religion that dominated the country in the early days faced similar discrimination. I know when I'm in West Virginia, people tell me about in the 1920s how the Ku Klux Klan not only attacked Black people, but they also attacked Catholics who had moved into West Virginia. And both Germans and Greeks and many other Southern Europeans in particular faced open discrimination when they came to the United States. They had a hard time getting jobs. They were limited to only certain jobs, particularly manual labor. Sound familiar, I think, to immigration today. So many immigrants groups have tread the same path that the immigrants that we're seeing now, and the immigrants we're seeing now are coming from different parts of the world. But it has been a history of this country that we see people come here, they come here to work, we put them to work, they help build this country. And at the end of the day, we all become Americans, which is what the whole point of integrating and working with communities is to make it possible for somebody not just to live here, but to become part of the society we have here. Last week, the federal government put Montgomery County on its so-called sanctuary jurisdiction list. I'm going to be clear again. We are not violating any federal law. Nobody has ever accused us of violating any federal law. We cooperate with ICE cases involving serious and violent crimes. That's been our policy. It's been the policy before I was county executive, and it's still our policy, and we followed it consistently. We don't believe in helping criminalize people just because they're undocumented. We're not going to turn our police into immigration agents. That is not their job. It doesn't make our community safer. And one of the things that's been a big deal here is the fact that because we have trust in the immigrant community, when there are incidents that involve the police, we're able to get help from the immigrant community without the fear of being identified as an undocumented immigrant. People are willing to talk with us and share information when we need it. And if they had to fear that they could be turned over to ICE and deported if they helped us solve a crime, we would not solve as many crimes as we're able to solve. While we're not going to interfere with ICE immigration enforcement actions, we can't. There's no way we will get between or can get between an action that they're taking. We're also not going to be silent about the repercussions it's having in our county. This is all a grand political stunt designed to scare people and divide communities and blame immigrant problems that they didn't create. And again, this is another pattern in American history. You identify a group of people who you don't like and who are different, and then you blame the problems on those people. And it's been a tactic, particularly in the American South, where for generations, white communities in the South, which have higher poverty levels than we do and lower education levels than we do, continued the struggle, but they were always told by the leaders of their governments and their economic leaders that just remember you're better off than Black people. And that it was a tactic to make sure these people understood they weren't on the bottom, but there was somebody else on the bottom below them, but also to make them very worried about what would happen if the people on the bottom started competing with them. So there's always been a divide us mentality among certain segments of society. And historically, there's been a lot of resistance to that. And, I think I managed to grow up in a time when that was becoming less the norm. Unfortunately, it feels like with Trump, we're going back to making it the norm again. It doesn't make victims less likely to report crimes. It makes workers more vulnerable to, it does make victims, I should say, less likely to report crimes. It makes workers more vulnerable to exploitation. There are people who, the only way they can get a job if they're undocumented is somebody will agree to pay them, but they won't pay them what the wage requirements are in the state of Maryland and Montgomery County. They'll work them hours that they would otherwise not be allowed to work them. So they're very vulnerable to exploitation because of the fear of deportation. And it creates fear in families who are just trying to live their lives. I've heard anecdotally from several departments across the county that undocumented residents are increasingly staying away from community events and not accessing food and healthcare and other essential services. I get the fear. Many immigrants don't distinguish between federal, state, and local government. And given what's happening nationally, I can't blame them for being cautious. But we need people to know that they can trust Montgomery County government. We're not here to target anyone. We're here to serve. We can't afford to have children missing school or families avoiding medical care and food assistance out of fear. Our outreach teams, our communication staff, and the media can help share this message with the individuals and families who've understandably gone into hiding. And you're welcome here, and we want you to know you're going to be treated with respect and dignity. Immigrants in Montgomery County make up over 40% of our workforce, including nearly 70% of the construction industry, 65% of the transportation and warehousing, and large shares of our healthcare, hospitality, and retail sectors. They are more than 10% of our STEM workforce and 7% of our business owners. And in 2019 alone, STEM workers and, 2019 alone, immigrant households in our county had $562 million in spending power and paid over $219 million in taxes. They're here helping build our economy, just like immigrant communities always have done. And we're proud to stand with them, not just this month, but every day. On Monday, we opened our new 6th District Police Station in Gaithersburg, which also serves Montgomery Village and surrounding communities. This station will support police operations in a part of the county that continues to grow, and will also house the Central Traffic Unit, investigative staff, and larger evidence facility to help improve services. But there's something more important here. The buildings include a community room. This is the first time we've built a community room into a station, and it's open and available to local groups. For anyone who's ever tried to organize in this county, one of the biggest hurdles has always been finding a space to meet. I know that from personal experience. When residents and officers have more opportunities to interact in everyday settings, it helps build relationships that go beyond enforcement. This station also reflects our long-term goals around sustainability. It's a net zero energy facility that uses solar power, electrification, and microgrid technology to reduce emissions and keep the building running even during a power outage. This is one of the first public safety buildings in Maryland, and one of the first in the country that's been designed to meet this level of performance. So I want to thank our Department of General Services for their work on this project. 2 years ago, there was nothing there. Today, we've got a modern, sustainable facility that improves public service and lowers our environmental impact. We got some more good news this week. Montgomery County's been popping up by various ratings groups as being a great place to be. And this week, Bethesda in Montgomery County was ranked number 20 in the country, 21 in the country by U.S. News and World Report as one of the best places to live, and number 2 in Maryland. Bethesda has a lot going for it: low unemployment, strong household incomes, and access to transit that most places don't have. Nearly 20% of residents commute by transit compared to 4% nationally. It's a walkable, connected place with good schools, jobs, and services. But being one of the best places to live also makes it one of the hardest places to keep affordable. That's something we've been working to address. And one of the most important examples of this work is the efforts we're doing to preserve affordable housing at the Battery Lane Apartments. That project protected more than 200 existing affordable units right in the heart of Bethesda. I want to remind people that a previous council and the Park and Planning Commission approved plans that they knew would actually reduce the number of affordable units, while vastly increasing the total number of apartments that were going to be built. In other words, Park and Planning was perfectly happy to create a situation where there would be less affordable housing in order to make room for luxury housing. Not exactly the highest need that we need to address in this county. We were able to work with the Housing Opportunities Commission to make sure the redevelopment didn't mean displacement. They wound up purchasing the property, and that longtime residents were able to stay in the neighborhood even as the area changes. Battery Lane is a good example of the kind of approach we need, not just in Bethesda, but across the county. We need to preserve what we have, and we need to build more housing that's accessible to working families, including people in education, healthcare, hospitality, and public safety. We've got more projects in the pipeline focused on walkability, open space, and a mix of housing options. And while Bethesda got a lot of attention, I want to acknowledge that Rockville and Germantown were also named among the top 250 best places to live. And last year, Silver Spring was ranked 3rd best in the country to raise a family by Fortune magazine. Montgomery County continues to be recognized as one of the most diverse and livable places in the U.S. That reflects the hard work of our residents and our businesses. I think it's important for us to promote these accolades because they help drive economic development. Business owners and executives want to move or expand to communities that they also want their family and their family and the families of their employees to want to live in as well. Second, these accolades combat the negative narrative that comes from a cabal of well-funded individuals, very often developers, but not all developers, who keep raising millions of dollars. And their message is the county's in decline and that our best days are behind us. And they're doing this for their own selfish political and economic reasons. You need to be aware of this because it's a tactic that's being used to argue that they should get more tax breaks and not be held responsible for building the infrastructure that we used to require if we hope to see new growth. In other words, if you don't lower their taxes, if you don't force the county taxpayers to pay more of their share for infrastructure in schools, then we're not going to see growth. It's simply not true. You can go all over the county right now and see cranes pretty much everywhere. And their plan, their tax bills go down and yours go up. It's a pretty simple equation. But they don't pay, you have to pay, or the schools and infrastructure don't get built. I disagree with this premise, and clearly national publications disagree with them as well. We do not have to sell out county residents in order to continue to grow our economy. So despite this acknowledgement of Bethesda, we can't afford to coast. We need to keep working to make sure the county is affordable, connected, and inclusive, and that we're not just growing, but growing in the right way. We've had a couple of major developments we've talked about a little bit before. We've got a major project now underway on the east side of the county using a new financing method that's going to help us get the infrastructure built over there to make the development possible. And in the last week, we announced the new development at the Pike and Rose, not Pike and Rose, the North Bethesda Metro Station that's going to house the Institute for Health Computing, and as well as be a beacon for other life sciences companies and housing as well. So there's a lot of good stuff happening here. It's all meant to make a difference and get us moving in the right direction. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our health team and others for any updates they'd like to share.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. A couple things that I just want to highlight. First, we'll give a little bit of an update on COVID. We've seen a slight increase lately, but the numbers are still very low, seasonal lows for COVID, flu, and RSV. We are surveying the landscape of new recommendations for COVID vaccines and vaccines overall, and we'll put out some information to help clarify that for residents as soon as we get it clarified, because the landscape keeps changing. I also want to just echo some of the comments that you made around immigrants. This is also Immigrant Health Month. It's also Men's Health Month, and we also recognize Juneteenth. And those two constituencies, especially immigrants and those who are descendants of slavery, we know have worse health outcomes. And we, as a county, as diverse as we are, we've had pretty significant changes in demographics. But coupled with those changes in demographics is a commitment to health. And so Montgomery County remains one of the top counties for health in the state and in the country. And it is a testament to the investments that we as a community have made in health and making sure that we are getting to all of our communities, our immigrant communities, our Black, our Asian, our Latino communities, our poor communities. Those investments make a difference, not just in health. So we want to make sure that folks have access to health and health care, but also making those investments in the social determinants, things like food and education and transportation, and just having a safe street to live and work on really do make a difference. We know that we want those communities to come out and get health care. And if there's one thing that COVID taught us is that you can't have pockets of people who are unhealthy. So it benefits no one if a group of people is scared to get treated for their infectious disease, whether it be COVID or syphilis or tuberculosis. We all benefit when they're treated so that they are healthier, and the rest of us are healthier so those diseases don't spread. We also know that when those communities, all of our communities, get preventative health care for things like hypertension and diabetes, we see fewer heart attacks and fewer strokes. And that benefits us all. Everybody's able to be more productive in society, to go to school and go to work, and be active and productive. So we know that access to things like doctors, things like Medicaid, healthcare access makes a difference for everybody. And so we know that that's important for our immigrant communities, for our Black communities, really for everybody here in Montgomery County. I also want to echo the sentiments around 988 and having that crucial service available for everybody, especially for our LGBTQ community, especially for our LGBTQ youth. We have seen, even in the just short few years that 988 has been available, that it literally is a lifeline for folks, especially in communities when they may not have somebody to talk to, they may not have that trusted adult, and being able to call that number or text that number and get outreach and support is makes it so that we have more people here with us. There are fewer suicides and fewer suicides attempts because of the support that folks get through that. So we strongly support that and know that it is a beneficial lifeline for the county. And with that, I will turn it back over to Lorna.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Dr. Stoddard?
I have no additional comments for this week.
Thank you. Members of the media?
I have one more comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to congratulate Aisha Braveboy, who is now officially the county executive of Prince George's County. So congratulations, Aisha. Look forward to working with you. I know you're going to be a great partner, and we got great things we can do together.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Members of the media, any questions, please raise your hands. Any questions for the County Executive, the Health Officer, or Dr. Stoddard? No further questions, no general questions this afternoon? Going once, twice? All right, I guess we're done for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Have a great afternoon.
Take care.
Mhm.